All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. I'm Caitlin Smith, your webinar host from Main Street ROI. We are very excited to be partnering with Adthena today. And for today's webinar, we're excited to welcome Peter Sady, Sales Manager at Adthena. The presentation will be about 40 minutes long so that we can leave plenty of time at the end for a live Q&A session. We'll also try to answer questions along the way. So feel free to type any questions that you have in the Q&A box, and we'll get back to them at the end of the webinar. As always, today's webinar will be recorded, and we'll send out a replay video along with a PDF of the slides to everyone who has signed up. So if you get any calls or are pulled away for work, don't worry, you're not going to miss a thing. With that, I will turn the webinar over to Peter so he can get started.
Thanks for that. So, hey everybody, I guess the reason why I've been brought on to do this, and just sorry to add a little bit of context to Adthena so everyone's aware, we do competitive intelligence for search. The reason why I've been brought on to do this webinar is because I've been working with enterprise search teams and mid-market search teams across many different industries, across different regions across the world for a good number of years now. And essentially from those experiences, what we found is that there's a number of fundamental things which are limiting search marketers to improve the overall search performance for their campaigns, irrelevant of how good a search marketer is. And it's due to a lack of data. So what I'm going to be taking you guys through today is what those findings are, what those limitations are, where do they sort of stem from, and how you can go about answering those things to overall improve your search performance and drive performance across campaigns. And I do apologize to everyone listening, just in case my voice goes a little bit hoarse at a few intervals. I've got a cold at the moment, so I may need to take a 5-second break in between here and there, so just bear with me. And by the way, if anyone has any questions, feel free to jot them out into the question column. I'll be keeping my eye on that as we proceed through the presentation. So, sorry, a bit of technology fail there. So here we are. So as I mentioned, our company Adthena, just to give you guys a quick snapshot introduction before we jump into the thick of things, our company Adthena has been around for 7 years. Essentially what we do is that we tell search marketers exactly what all competing advertisers are doing across the Google auction and Bing auction. So essentially, we provide visibility on opportunities which are previously invisible to expand market presence, improve efficiencies, and make smarter, more strategic decisions around search. And I do have to sort of highlight our mission statement here, which is to empower marketers to optimally reach, acquire, and retain consumers with unique data-driven search intelligence. What I do want to sort of highlight there is the data-driven search intelligence. Now, the reason why I say that is because in the current context of where search marketers are running AdWords campaigns, there is a fundamental lack of data which limits your ability to improve performance. Of course, you have visibility over everything that you're doing, but you don't have visibility over what any other competing advertisers are doing. And of course, that has a large impact on your own performance. You don't have that visibility. So once again, I want to highlight the data-driven search intelligence piece, which we're going to be playing on a lot today. So just quickly as well, so there's a bit of a delay in the change of slides here, but there we go. I'm just going to minimize this down and look at any questions as we go along at every few minutes. So these are the sort of solution areas that any competitive intelligence tools focuses on relating to search. So this isn't just specific to us. I'm going to be talking around all sort of competitive intelligence tools across the search space, but essentially they play into these 5 solution areas to help you understand everything that's happening. I'm going to go into a bit more detail on this later on and how that's going to answer those fundamental questions. So we'll touch upon that in more detail later on. And just quickly, the questions and fundamental learnings which I'm going to be discussing today are going to be based around experiences working with advertisers like these. Obviously, advertisers across many different industries, not just in the US, across Europe, across Australia, and something which impacts search marketers on a global level universally. So, enough about us and more about what we're here to discuss today. So, to really set the scene, I want to touch upon how you go about improving performance. And it's not necessarily just relating to search, it's how you improve performance in sport, when you're learning anything. And it's done through feedback feedback loops. So essentially, a feedback loop is a mechanism where you basically go for a cyclical process to improve overall performance and drive improvements. So to touch upon what these points are here, first of all, when you're trying to improve performance in anything, you first of all assess at all the things which you're currently doing. You then explore alternatives to what it is that you could be doing. You then decide on what it is that you actually are going to modify, and then of course implement the change and execute whatever thing that you've actually modified, and then reassess what the impact of that is. And you're continuously going about this. The reason why I'm highlighting this is because at the moment, without using competitive intelligence, when you're running AdWords campaigns, you only have essentially one feedback loop. And that's where what you're putting into the Google auction, you can see how that's impacting your performance metrics, your clicks, CPCs, click-through rates, so on and so forth. But you don't have visibility over what your competitors are doing. And that, of course, also has an impact on your performance metrics. So you're essentially missing out on a feedback loop which you could be utilizing to improve your performance. And to sort of touch upon how this is relevant across all areas of life, just want to touch upon the example here of specifically for sports, because it's really obvious in this sort of scenario. So when you're trying to improve the performance of a sports team, irrelevant of NFL, basketball, this example which I have here is rugby. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, given it's not all that popular here in the US, but essentially for any sports whatsoever, it's quite difficult to observe everything that all of the competing teams are doing and to stand back and look at your own performance. And that's why video coaching exists. So think about it this way. If you're, the NBA finals are on right now. If you're an player in an NBA sports team, you can't really look at what every single other player is doing, analyze what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, what motions they go through that work for them. And you can't really observe everything that you're doing. So in a way, it's really quite similar to search in the way that, you can't really digest everything that your competitors are doing and break down their strategies. You can get a top level idea from data sources like AdWords and Auction Insights, but you can't really dive into it in that much detail. So, and of course, video coaching is seen as something which is absolutely essential to driving performance across all areas, across all sporting sort of functions there as well. So once again, just to touch upon relating this back to search, of course, that's why what we're here to discuss. So at this point in time, all of you would be putting things into the auction. So you'd be putting what keywords you want to target, what messaging you want to use, what sort of bid strategies you want to implement, so on and so forth. And of course, that impacts your performance metrics. But I'm sure all of you would be all too aware that things like clicks and CPCs are constantly changing, despite you keeping everything the same. And that's because, once again, your competitors are doing the exact same thing as you, which is impacting you. And that fundamentally limits your ability to sort of learn from everyone else in the market to drive your performance. So what competitive intelligence specifically for search is, it's not just us, but a number of other tools out there. It will allow you to essentially have visibility on data based on other advertisers that will allow you to identify those opportunities to improve performance, whether it be to expand your market presence, improve efficiencies, or simply to make more smarter strategic decisions around search. No questions thus far? Cool. So how do you actually go about analyzing your entire relevant space? So for starters, of course, for search, you want to analyze the whole market. Tying back to the example of the sports team trying to improve their performance, once again, using basketball, seeing as it's NBA final season. So for a basketball team, if you're trying to analyze another rival team and what strategies they're using, you don't want to use, you don't just want 10 minutes of game time. You don't want to look at just two players. You want to look at all the games they've played so you can understand all their plays, and you want to look at every single player because you want all that data so you can be prepared and analyze all of it so you can maximize your knowledge off the back of that. And the exact same thing applies to search. So you want to understand your entire relevant market, so you understand every single competitor that you're up against, what works for them, what isn't, and where the market opportunities may lie. Now, we are the only ones in the space which really take this whole market view approach. There are a number of tools out there which do give a sort of more partial view, more keyword-driven tool, which of course is still useful because it will provide insights in certain areas, but in order to maximize the insights and maximize the value, you really have to employ this sort of whole market view. And the way that you understand the data on other advertisers, and all tools will utilize this, is that they go about basically playing into these 5 solution areas. So for one, just to explain each one, so for gap analysis, so understanding what additional keywords you could be going after to drive traffic to your websites. Ad copy analysis, so understanding what messaging other advertisers are using, what you could be utilizing yourself to improve your own performance. Strategic planning, so understanding who are the key players in all different market segments, not just overall, but in all the little sub-segments that you may be advertising and targeting. How much are they investing comparatively to you? What does the overall market share look like? Are people dropping in and out? And of course, these two, so partner management and brand protection, relate more to advertisers trying to protect their brand presence. So as all of you would know, brand bidding, so people bidding on each other's brand terms, is getting more and more common. So how do you basically quantify how big of an impact that's having on you as an advertiser, and what's the right set of actions to combat that, whether it be just purely from a competitive standpoint, but also from managing any affiliate networks which you may have certain agreements with as well. So essentially, using those solutions, you're able to answer these real common questions, which are the ones which I mentioned at the very start, which are sort of fundamental questions, and a lacking of data in these areas, which limits advertisers to improve their performance. And no matter how good a search marketer really is, you don't know what you don't know, and you don't have visibility over what you don't have visibility. So it's essentially, this is something which you can't get visibility over otherwise, which will enable you to drive those improvements. So just to go for each one, so what does our competitive landscape look like? You can get quite a reasonable understanding of this just by doing Google searches and across AdWords and Auction Insights, but to really gain a strong understanding on more of a sort of category level view, so at all individual segments that you're playing in, of course, it's very hard to understand without using competitive intelligence. Going over to how much are we spending compared to our competitors, that's really quite impossible to understand, is probably the most commonly asked questions. What are competitors targeting that I could be in terms of keywords or just product categories? Of course, you can manually go about that through searching yourself, and spend hours and hours and hours and hours of time and not really getting a complete picture, or you can once again utilize a competitive intelligence tool. Going on to here, so what messaging is my competition using? So once again, you could manually search every single term that you're targeting, so every single keyword that you're targeting, and have a look at the messaging, call to actions, price points which your competitors are using. But in order to get an accurate picture of that, you basically have to be searching for each keyword multiple times a day. And if you're targeting maybe 500 or 1,000 keywords, that's obviously quite impossible to do. And it's funny, I've spoken to a number of advertisers who've actually had a dedicated team just to go about this process. So yes, the data is available in these tools and it's at your fingertips, so you can understand what that looks like, so you can learn from what other advertisers are doing. How do we monitor competitor activity changes? So when do competitors drop in and out of market? How do I take advantage in those shifts and those opportunities? And what sort of shifts in competitive strategies have what impacts on my own performance? Things, once again, which are really difficult to understand, and you have to be constantly searching yourself, which is obviously extremely time consuming, or you can rely on a competitive intelligence tool. And lastly, who's targeting my brand? What's the overall impact? How much are they driving up my brand CPCs? How much traffic am I losing? And what is the best sort of strategy to combat that? So those are the 6 real common questions, which I'm now going to go into and sort of answer in a bit more detail, but just give me 1 second. Beautiful. Once again, everyone, if you have questions on anything that I'm going through, feel free to fill them out here as I go along, and I will be checking once every few minutes to see if there's anything there. So moving onwards. So understanding your competitive landscape. So first of all, in order to do this in the best possible fashion, you want to be looking at the whole market view. So once again, going back to The example with the sports team, you don't want to be analyzing just a small segment of players or just a small snippet of game time. You want to be looking at everything that all of them, basically all the data that you can to drive performance. And the exact same thing is true for search. So as I touched upon, there are other tools out there which will basically be keyword driven, where they'll give you segments of data of everything that's happening across the market. Sorry guys, once again, just to clarify, everyone suffering from a bad cold and trying to make sure that I don't lose my voice along the way through. So if I just have a 10-second break here. Thanks, everyone. So, touching back to what I was saying, so there are tools out there which essentially will give you partial understanding of what's happening across search. I would recommend utilizing them if you haven't used competitive intelligence in the past, or if you're just starting to ramp off or just starting to launch campaigns, because there are useful insights that you can pull out of them. But in order to maximize and really drive performance, and if you're operating large budgets, you really want to utilize that sort of whole market view to get the best insight on everything that's happening. Now, the way that you go about assessing everything is basically to go around these 5 steps. So when you're looking at the whole market, you want to first of all map out all the places that you're going to be playing in. You then want to assess essentially what sort of volumes you can drive from playing at all those spaces. Moving on from there, you really want to segment out that data so you understand what are the key players in each specific segment. How much are they, what sort of messaging are they using? What sort of keywords are they targeting for each particular category? So you can understand each particular space and construct strategies for each one. Then looking at goals. So what goals you want to set for each particular market segment. And of course, looking at budgets, understanding how much you should be investing, what sort of CPCs for each particular market segment for each keyword. And in order to do maximize, how should I say this? In order to do this in the best possible fashion, of course, advertisers want to understand how much their competing advertisers are investing into those certain segments, which brings me to go into the next question. How much are we spending compared to our competitors? So really doing this by checking Google yourself is impossible. Going about, there's literally no way you can do it using AdWords and Auction Insights. But there are tools which basically use machine learn AI, basically algorithm processes to help you understand this. And so the 2 things that you can really understand from this are, first of all, how much is an advertiser spending comparatively to me in a certain market segment. So from overall, utilizing that information to help educate you when you're basically planning your campaigns, but also from a CPC perspective. So looking at what sort of average positioning, or just purely from an average CPC play, to understand what their bidding strategy might be and what would be the best strategy for yourself as an advertiser. Moving on to the next question, who is targeting my brand and what's the overall impact? So this is something which has become more and more common as time has progressed. We all know the only real winner in this sort of scenario is Google, seeing as brand CPCs are driven up. And it's become so common that 98% of advertisers, we've seen this happen on 98% of advertisers that we've been dealing with. And generally what we found that it's happening on the highest volume brand terms. So obviously it's a pretty big problem because advertisers invest a lot of money into building up that brand or building up their brands. And of course, people searching for that brand are twice as likely to convert. So it's really important to protect your brand presence. It's super vital, but it's very difficult to do without using competitive intelligence. So essentially, the impact that this has is, of course, this drives up brand CPCs, which means that your margins are lower, you're less efficient with your budget, and of course, as advertisers potentially even outposition you on your own brand terms, it means that you're losing those valuable branded clicks to other competitors. So quite a big problem that we've found, and something which everyone's trying to address at this point in time. So how do you do that? So using competitive intelligence, when you're monitoring all these terms, you're able to, once again, doing this on your own, unless you're searching your own brand term 3, 4, 10, 24 times a day, you're never really going to fully understand who's targeting your brand terms. And of course, you can never really understand how much they're investing, how much they're gaining off the back of that as well. So essentially use AI, use machine learning, use competitive intelligence to fully understand the impact that that's having on your business, fully understand what impacts that's having on your brand CPCs, so you can better educate what you're currently doing there and take the right course of action in combating that. And next question, how do we monitor our competitors' activities? So once again, you might choose to search each term that you're playing in, or keyword should I say, that you're playing in manually each day, multiple times a day, to see when a competitor drops in or out or increases their positioning. But we all know that you're never really going to get an accurate view of what's happening based on that. You're never going to be able to capture, well, even maybe 10, 15% of what's happening if you're playing on a large enough keyword set. So utilize competitive intelligence to understand when advertisers are dropping in and out of market, increasing their presence, targeting a new category, or just entirely dropping out, because when that occurs, there are massive opportunities for advertisers to take advantage of what's happening there. So it gives you the ability to capture additional market, reduce CPCs, or once again, if you can see that your CPCs are going through the roof on a particular category and you don't understand why, it's most likely because, well, it's certainly because another competing advertiser has come in, and you've got to adjust accordingly and tell the rest of the business that it's happening and make the right adjustments. So really critical to understand when this might be occurring so you can take advantage of it. And once again, competitive intelligence tools in general will be able to help you answer when that's occurring. What are the terms that we could be targeting to generate relevant traffic? Well, once again, you could manually be searching things. There are keyword expansion tools which exist, but to better educate what you're doing there, once again, competitive intelligence tools will be able to analyze that straight away for you. So if there are relevant terms that you could be targeting to drive traffic, you'll have full visibility over that. And also as the market shifts, as new product lines come out, or obviously that's dependent on what industry you might play in, you'll have visibility over that, so you can always maximize the amount of traffic whenever the opportunity does arise. What messaging is my competition utilizing? So back to the example which I mentioned earlier on, in terms of the actual messaging which you're using, you can be manually searching that yourself constantly as you go throughout the day, or you can utilize competitive intelligence to understand how messaging is evolving. So what sort of price points are they using, how that's evolving, special offers, how that's impacting your own offers, and maybe that's impacting your own click-through rates. So by utilizing these automated insights, you'll be able to stay on top of that and make sure that your click-through rate is always optimized and your performance is always maximized. And you can also educate the rest of the business as competitors' messaging and strategies are evolving as well, so they can stay on top of that as well. And those are actually the 6 main key points. Now, in order to give a bit of insight on the types of improvements that this can generate, I've highlighted a case study here, which we have with Volvo, and this is one of many, many examples that we have where by having visibility over entire relevant competitive space and by utilizing all those sort of data points, are actually able to drive very, very strong improvements. So just to add add a bit of a background to this. So we're working with Volvo over in the UK. And one of the things that they were doing is that they were trying to expand into the electric cars category. Now, over in the UK, they were doing that, but it wasn't really driving the right performance that they wanted. Also, obviously, Volvo had a very good search team there, so it wasn't a matter of their own ability, but it was a matter of they just simply didn't have visibility over the opportunities in the market. So what they utilized Adthena to do was to understand that entire relevant competitive space, understand who were all the advertisers there, what keywords were they targeting, how much were they investing into certain areas, and what was this level of competitiveness on each one of those terms. Now, by using that whole market view, what they were able to understand was that there are a number of keywords which they weren't actively targeting, which a number of advertisers had actually just dropped out of market for. So and that was keywords with lower competition, but which still captured the intent of the end customer, so to speak, to actually go in and book a test drive. So essentially, what they did was that they shifted budget towards those keywords, which ended up resulting in a much more efficient use of that budget. So they're able to decrease CPCs by 50% and increase in showroom visits and overall drive a 300% increase in clicks. So it's just giving you a quick snapshot of the possibilities that lie when you look at everything which you simply don't have visibility over. So any questions thus far? No. So, sorry, my little slide thing is frozen up. Sorry, we're not there yet. So basically the key learning and takeaway points, which I do want to highlight is, for best practice, it doesn't matter how good of a search marketer you are. If you don't have visibility over certain things, you don't know what you don't know. So utilize competitive intelligence to understand what all other advertisers are doing so you can better improve your own performance. Doesn't need to be us. There's plenty of other tools out there which do this as well, but you can really use that to maximize and understand the things which you don't have visibility over. This is data which is easily accessible, so it's not going to break the bank. And of course, lastly, I do need to stress, utilize that whole market view to really understand everything that's happening there and paint the full picture. And guys, that is actually pretty much it. Understand that that may have been about 5-10 minutes shorter than what we originally budgeted for. I'm going to open this up to any questions which may be asked now.
It looks like Ashley had a question. She was looking for examples on competitive intelligence tools.
Sure. So there's tools such as SEMrush, there's AdGuru, SpyFu, Search Monitor, and of course us Adthena.
Awesome. That is the only question I see right now. Does anyone else have any questions at all for us? Oh, looks like a couple more coming in. Dax is looking for, where do you stand on searching for yourself and damaging CPC?
Where do we stand on searching for ourselves and damaging CPCs? What could I ask
Actually,
them?
he changed that. He said CTR.
So searching for yourself and damaging click-through rate.
Yeah.
Yes. So basically, when we go about doing these checks, Google takes into account the fact that there's a number of tools out there which are constantly doing searches and crawling the internet, and it takes all of that into account when it's calculating all the different bits and pieces like that. So it understands, and it comes into the same thing comes into play when it's looking at search volumes as well. And understand that there's plenty of things out there which are constantly crawling and searching, and it just takes that into account when it delivers its calculations.
Okay, awesome. Charlotte asked, what is a defensive strategy? And then she added, since my competition will be spying on me.
What is a defensive strategy? That's a good question. Look, it really depends on the context. There's many different situations that it could play into, but let's just say, for example, if I am an advertiser who, let's just say, for example, I'm trying to be more competitive on generic terms, and there's really strong competition on those generic terms, and a lot of advertisers are being very aggressive there. I guess the defensive strategy, so to speak, in my understanding, or defensive at least, would be to look at basically maybe you can potentially shy away from those high competition terms and look at also where there are maybe other keywords which you're not currently targeting to stay away from those high levels of competition. On top of that, if you're monitoring daily fluctuations, so to look at when certain advertisers are dropping in and out of market, maybe there's breakouts in terms of an hourly basis of what their strategies may be, taking advantage of that data to essentially be as smart as possible with your budget.
Awesome. Christine said she is a very beginner with Google Ads, but now managing them at her organization, and asked what are your recommendations for her, any best practices? And then she also asked, how many keywords should you have in each campaign?
Um, I'm I'm not going to lie, that really is dependent on the given situation. Given I don't know the particular industry and don't know the certain product categories, I really can't give a recommendation specifically on that front because it really is dependent on the context of each advertiser. But what I can say, if you're just starting off in that sense, is definitely try understand what it is that other advertisers are doing and what might be working from them. If you're limited on time, try to dedicate at least a little bit of time to monitor what's happening there, because there's a lot of learnings that you can take just by looking a little bit outside the box.
Okay, awesome. Armando asked how to proceed with brand bidding and how to counter.
How to proceed with brand bidding and how to counter. Geez, I could ask that a lot. So yeah, cool. So with what we find with brand bidding, it's about understanding how and when and who is targeting your brand. So for advertisers, there's generally not just brand terms, there's also brand generic terms which are being targeted. So utilize competitive intelligence to understand who's targeting each one of those terms. Segment that out so you understand, is it just one or two of these terms, or is it all of the terms, or what does the competitive set look like for each one of those terms? Have a look at when that might be occurring. So what time of day, perhaps it's also happening at certain days of the week more than most. And then by fully understanding what that piece looks like, you're able to understand, okay, when are they targeting my brand? What sort of messaging are they using when targeting my brand? How many clicks are they generating from that? What sort of impact is that having on me as well? So you're able to basically say, this is how much they're gaining, this is how much they're investing, this is when and how they're doing it, and utilizing that, basically adjusting your bids accordingly to combat that at those particular times. Because what we find advertisers do a lot of the time when they don't have this data is that they sort of just throw budget at the problem. So they go, we know that our brand is, let's just say you're Toyota. Toyota knows that another OEM is targeting their brand terms, and they just start, throwing huge amounts of budget at it. Of course, I'm just sort of making this example up just to the context of everyone, not specifically to them, just to make sure. But a lot of advertisers just sort of throw money at the problem without really understanding who, what, when, how. And because of that, there's a lot of budget wastage which takes place. So what my advice for that would be, understand everything that's happening there and use that data to be as smart as your budget was possible, whether that be to really just, if you're being outpositioned on sort of certain key terms, up bids in those certain times, so you're not outpositioned there, and yeah, just overall being as smart with your budget as possible.
Awesome. Bill said that they are a very small company. They have about 15,000 per month in online sales. He asked, what is the cost of a starter program with you? I have one specific competitor and would like to track with them.
The cost of, starting price of us, look, to be honest, we are very much more of a mid-market to enterprise size solution. From what that individual, sorry, I forgot the name there, for what just mentioned, with that sort of budget, it probably is best to go with one of the other Intel tools which I mentioned, because generally, with us, it's going to be, in the thousands. As I said, generally we play with a mid-market and enterprise tier advertisers. But yes, my advice would be, go with one of those other solutions until you build your budget up, and there's going to be a real need to be as smart with that budget as possible. It's going to be even more critical, so to speak. Sorry, I can't give you a bit of a recommendation on that one.
No problem. Okay, so Ashley had previously asked about competitive intelligence tools, and she said, in my experience, a lot of those competitor analysis tools give incorrect data. What are the most reliable metrics on these services from your experience?
Cool. And yeah, she has a very strong point on that. That with some of these tools, and this is sort of the reason why I was stressing the whole market view and AI-driven piece. So with those other tools, what keywords you can go after, you'll get a reasonable understanding of what it is, or you'll have some suggestions there. I'm going to say that there are still a lot of gaps there, but keywords are something that you can't really get wrong. Same thing with ad copy messaging, although those tools other tools apart from us may not update it anywhere near as frequently, but you can still get a rough idea of what they're utilizing. So in terms of accurate data points, I would say what keywords they're going after and what sort of messaging. So those would be the two bits which you should utilize. But if you're really trying to get a strong understanding of what the entire competitive set looks like, market share, daily sort of fluctuations, in terms of share of spend, things like that, you really want to utilize that whole market view and utilize machine learned AI to give you the answers to that, because that ultimately will give you the most accurate data.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Mark said, what are the worst examples you have seen of manufacturers and their distribution partners hurting each other's search campaigns?
That's an interesting one. Yeah, I've seen a fairly good few examples, and yes, so essentially, uh, it really is done on a case-by-case basis. I can't really tell you a specific example because I don't know whether the specific advertiser which comes into mind would like me sort of vocalizing that over a webinar, and just in case there are, non-disclosure agreements signed. But what I can say is that, yeah, a lot of the time, let's just say when you're in retail, there may be certain agreements in place, and a lot of advertisers simply don't keep to them. And I have seen instances where, so let's just say brand CPCs have been inflated by maybe, let's say 50%, in a very short space of time on both mutual brand terms, and management isn't even really aware that it's happening. It's more so that it's being done at more of a lower level by someone potentially in an agency which has been not all that experienced, which is really driving it. So I have seen some pretty bad instances of it, but unfortunately, due to sort of agreements with our clients, I can't really give you case specific ones there.
That is understandable. Armando thanked you for the great answer. And Jerome asked, why should I bid on my brand name if I show #1 in organic and people are looking for me, not my competitors?
Sorry, could you just repeat that question?
Yep, he said, why should I bid on my brand name if I show #1 in organic and people are looking for me, not my competitors?
That is a great question. The reason why you should, I'm going to tell you now, is actually I can't give you a distinct answer, but I will give you two scenarios. You are entirely right that a lot of advertisers don't want to spend budget on that because it could be budget spent elsewhere. And if no one is targeting your own brand terms, then yes, I completely agree. You shouldn't really be bidding on your own brand terms because you can capture those clicks yourself. However, what we have found is that working with some advertisers is that they prefer to bid on their own brand terms because it gives them more spaces on the page, which means that technically they'll capture more clicks. On top of that, allows them to customize the messaging there as well. And for some advertisers, there may be competitors dropping in and out of market, and they're once again without using competitive intelligence and without constantly searching yourself, you never really know when they are appearing on there or not, or it's just really difficult to monitor. So some advertisers choose to, as I'm going to tailor the message, I'm going to get more positions on the page, and just in case a competitor comes in because I don't know when they're dropping in and out. And others utilize our technology exactly to do what he just mentioned there, to have visibility over when no one's targeting those brand terms so that you can turn off bids entirely. So it's really on a sort of advertiser preference there on what the given context is, but he's entirely right in saying that.
Okay, awesome. And then he also said, what tools do you use to find our competitors' budgets? He said he joined the webinar late. So apologize.
Sure. It's quite all right. So it's an entirely AI-driven process. So essentially the way that our solution works, and also any competitive intelligence tool works to a certain degree, is that there's observations taken from the Google SERP. So let's just say you take a term. So what am I holding in my hand? Pen or iPhone. So let's take the term iPhone. So each competitive intelligence tool will take that term and then plug it into Google and observe what the results are on the on the SERP and give you insights based on that. So the way that we're able to determine things like spend is basically that we're doing that on a regular enough basis that we're able to capture all the fluctuations on the SERP in terms of average positioning, ad frequency, and we have an AI which sits in the back of basically the Adthena engine, which analyzes hundreds of different data points to give a strong approximation on what an advertiser's spend would be. And I'm not here to tell you that we're going to be able to tell you exactly what an advertiser's spend would be, because at the end of the day it's all just estimates. But from a comparative standpoint, when you analyze all those metrics with that AI learned process, machine learned process, you're able to get a strong understanding there.
Okay, awesome. And then Ashley has another question. Are there any best practices for budget allocations between branded and non-branded terms? She said, I always feel like I need to put an asterisk next to conversions that come from brand term campaigns because people were already searching for her company.
I really can't give you specific recommendations on that because it is specific to each advertiser and what objectives you may have. If, for example, you're trying to really focus and drive traffic within a certain segment of the market that you haven't had strong penetration in, then you obviously have to go after the generic terms a little bit more to drive that interest. But I can't really give you a recommendation on that, I'm sorry, because once again, it's really dependent on the context, it's really dependent on the level of competition in each area and where the gains might be and where the focuses for your business and for you as an advertiser may lie.
Okay, understood. Looks like that is it for questions. Does anyone else have any that they want to add before we end things? Oh, Jerome has one more question. How do you do call tracking on Facebook?
We do not do call tracking on Facebook. We do competitive intelligence for search and Bing.
Okay.
I mean, sorry, for Google and Bing, should I say. So full functionalities on Google and partial functionalities on Bing.
Awesome. Well, I think that is it. So thank you all so much for joining today's webinar. And thank you very much, Peter, for this awesome information, especially with your cold that you've got. And as a reminder, we'll be sending out the replay video and PDF of the slides. So look out for that. Main Street will be hosting another webinar. AdRoll will be presenting this month in May. So you can look out for that information if you'd like to register. And thank you everyone for attending the webinar.
Beautiful. Thanks for that.
Yep, thank you.
Bye.